Hey guys, how's it going? So today we're going to discuss what's known as active and passive voice. This applies to both written and spoken form. We're going to talk a little bit about what each one is and how to structure our sentences, communicate in either what's known as an active or, again, passive voice. So let's go ahead and take a look first at what an active voice is. Okie doke. So an active voice in a sentence is where the subject will come before an action. In essence, it's where the subject is immediately identified as being the actor of the action in the sentence. So the example that I give is Mr. Chunks tore into his new toy. Okay, so first things first, you're going to be able to, once I can get my writing element to work, you're going to be able to identify that our subject in this case is Mr. Chunks. I'm going to go ahead and underline that one. That's our subject. And his action is that he tore, so that's our verb, into his new toy. And so toy is what's called our object. So that is what is receiving the action. So again, right away, I have my subject before my verb. So Mr. Chunks before tore. He is the one who is identified as having committed the action against the toy or directed at the toy. Other examples of active voice would be Mr. Chunks threw up on the carpet, right? So again, Mr. Chunks is my subject. What did he do? Oh, he threw up, unfortunately. And the object of that action, what was affected by the action in that case was the carpet. You could also do another one like Batman threw Joker off of the building. Batman is your subject. What did he do? Oh, he threw Joker off of the building. So Joker in that example would be the object of the action, right? Because that's what is affected by the action. Now, there's a lot of benefits to using an active voice in a sentence, especially when it's written. It keeps the readers a little bit more engaged. Active voice tends to be preferred because it creates a little more momentum in the writing. There's not a whole lot of guesswork. The subject is immediately identified, the action is seen, and relative to its opposite, which is known as passive voice, which we're going to talk about in 1 second. Okay, so talking next about passive voice. This runs opposite to active voice. In the active voice, we identified the subject committing an action or doing an action, I guess, first. So again, in that active voice sentence, we had our subject and then our verb and then the object of that verb. Whereas in passive, it's the object of the action. So whatever is being affected by the action. So object, verb, and then the subject would actually come last, if at all. In some instances, the source of the action is omitted altogether, and that can be beneficial in a few ways. Like, for example, like let's say I'm waiting for my paycheck, and so I reach out to my boss, and in an email I would say, oh, my paycheck never came, okay? So rather than being active and saying, you, so you being the subject, never sent my check, so you, subject, sent, verb, check, the object of the verb. Instead, I'm trying to be polite by omitting the subject altogether, but still, in a passive way, sharing that information, which is my check never came. So I've got my check, which is the object of the verb. So instead of identifying the actor or the person responsible for the check not arriving, which in this case is the boss that I'm emailing in the example I'm giving, I'm omitting that as a courtesy. So it's implied, meaning it's understood that if I'm sending an email to this person, despite the fact that I'm not identifying them as specifically being responsible for not having sent the check, it is implied through that passive voice. So it's understood through the context of that message. Anywho, the receiver of the action, like I mentioned earlier, is going to come first. So where I wrote, the new toy was torn into by Mr. Chunks. So if we break down the sentence, I have my object of the action first, which is the new toy. So that's my object. Was torn into, so the verb in this instance is torn. So that's my verb. And the subject or the actor responsible for that action is Mr. Chunks. So my subject comes last. Now here, This is just kind of a repeat of what I was saying earlier, how in some cases the person or thing responsible for the action is omitted altogether. So you'll see the word sans. This is Latin for without or excluding. So this means without a source, or an actor. So if I were to change the example sentence I gave, where I have the new toy was torn into by Mr. Chunks, I could actually get rid of Mr. Chunks altogether. So for example, the new toy, so there's my object, was torn into, so I have my verb. And instead of saying by Mr. Chunks, I would just end it with a period and just eliminate that last portion. So rereading it, still in its passive voice, the new toy was torn into. So in this sentence, I'm just passively letting you know, hey, this new toy was torn into. I'm not or designating someone responsible or something responsible for why the toy was torn into or for who possibly tore into the toy. So anywho, so I encourage you to integrate as much active voice in the sentences that you're writing as possible. However, it's perfectly fine to vacillate or decide between using active and passive voice, depending on what's most suitable for you. I just wanted you to be aware that preferentially, for me at least, active voice tends to be a little bit more exciting, engaging, and it connects more with me as a reader at least. And you may want to consider that as you continue writing moving forward. So anyway, thank you guys again. Hope you have a great day. And let me go ahead and stop this recording. Until the next one. All right.